All right, guys. Well, welcome back to the Post Frame 360 podcast. As you know, I am one of your hosts, Scott Cragg, along with Josh Nowlin. Josh, welcome.
The big number two. How's
Big
it going,
number
Scott?
two.
Good
Yeah,
morning.
yeah. And two things here. So, number one, if you guys have listened to the last podcast, Josh introed. So, I always concede to Josh's. He said whining. He did. I was trying to be nice and not say that he whined to me, but he did a little bit.
I think I did pretty good. I don't know.
Oh, you did great. You did great. Yeah. So, all right. Well, if you are watching online right now, you see that there's an extra person. It's more than just me and Josh. What we decided is we needed a little bit of extra wisdom. We needed just a little more beauty than what we can bring to you. So we have the wise and the handsome Mark Eastman. Now, you may be saying, well, who's Mark Eastman? Well, I'm going to let him tell you who he is. And man, it's a great story about how he got here. So, high level, our board of directors, one of our board of directors read an article, a blog post that Mark had done, and was like, "Oh man, this is good stuff." Forwarded it to Jeff Bonebrake, our president of Burrows, and said, "Man, you should read this article." So Jeff read it, and then Jeff goes, "Oh man." And he forwarded it to me and Josh and said, "You guys should read this." So read the article, and I was like, "Man, this is really good stuff." And then I followed a couple of links that Mark had to his website, to some of the tools that he has. You'll notice, and he'll talk about this in a minute, some of the services he offers. And it was great. And so I was like, well, maybe Mark will answer an email if I say, "Hey, I enjoyed your article. Would you consider maybe being a guest on our podcast?" So Mark and I have had a couple of conversations. They have been phenomenal. I'm excited to have him here. And here's what I'm going to tell you guys. Mark is not a customer of Burrow's. And I think that's one of the things that's so great about this. He does not currently purchase. He's not a customer of Burrow's. But as Mark's going to share, he's been in the building business for quite a while. He's built a lot of different things, and I'll let him tell you what those are. But I thought what this would be valuable is, I know if you listen to Josh and I talk, I'm sure you would think, well, okay, I love what Josh and Scott are saying, but man, they work for Burrows, right? So like everything they say has got to be tilted toward, it's got to benefit Burrows. I think what you're going to find from Mark is some of the things he's going to share with you are a lot of the things that Josh and I have been saying, but you're going to hear it from an unbiased source. So I hope that's a fair introduction. At this point, Josh, unless you have anything to add, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. And Mark, tell us a little bit about your story, how you got to where you're at.
I do just want to say quickly that Scott started this and said, I'm going to do a real quick intro. My goodness, 5 minutes has gone already.
Hey, 2 minutes and 59 seconds.
And Mark is, he said handsome. Hey, I don't know, but that mustache is badass.
It's
you have
killer,
a badass
right?
mustache, Mark.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and thank you for the compliments. That I appreciate that, and I'm excited to be here today. So, my story, if you will, goes back a long time. I've been doing construction for over 40 years now, and started in the early 80s, but grew up on a farm and thought that's where I would probably spend the rest of my life. That's what I had planned to do. But at an early age, my dad died and had cancer and died. And so consequently, it kind of put me in a awkward position where I was going to have to figure out what I was going to do. And I had been working part-time in the wintertime for a friend of mine's dad framing houses. Mm-hmm. So it's like, went to work for them full time, and then did some other construction, and like most people that do construction, they kind of started out working for somebody else, and it's like, well, I can do this on my own. Why do I need to work for them? And so did that, started out, and I've done all kinds of framing, built houses, commercial cabinetry, just pretty much the gambit of construction. And, just that trying to figure out, it was a lot easier to build things than it was to figure out the business part of it. It's hard to do the business because you don't learn that. And so anyway, muddling through, and finally you kind of get to a point where you just, you're just living out that rut. You're just stuck in that position. And so kind of conceded that that was just the life I was going to have. Then in 2012, I had a scaffold plank break and ended up with concussion in the hospital, unconscious for 3 days. And when I came back out of that concussion, is kind of recovering, I'm like, started doing some reading just as I was recovering. Had never been a real big reader before that. And read Andy Andrews' book, The Traveler's Gift, and it kind of turned things around for me in that I realized that I had some control over what was going on. And so I started implementing some things and had, just kind of turned around my perspective and realized that I could choose how things were going to turn out. So that's kind of what got me to where I am now, still doing construction, but we are working on this coaching consulting part of it to try and help other contractors figure out the things that I had, spent 40 plus years figuring out. Because I think with some help and some tools, they can make that, transition a little quicker. So that's kind of that, brief overview of how I got to where I am now.
Yeah. So it's good to hear that story again. You shared that with me, and man, it's good and it's sobering to hear it again. And I hope for our listeners, some of the things that I think Mark said that hopefully you're resonating with, and it's going to draw you into this conversation. I had to figure it out. There's so much about the construction space, if you stumble into it, that you have to figure out, right? And you want to do your own thing, you want to be successful, and then you just get to working, right? I'm just working. And you don't stop to think about, wait a second, I've got to make sure I'm building on a solid foundation. I got to put things in place to make sure that my business can survive long term, and even more importantly, that you can survive long term. I'm going to put a little something in here. I'd be amiss if I didn't take advantage of also something that Mark said. He mentioned falling. I'm sorry that happened. That happens way too often. For our listeners, we'll be talking about the Ridgeline safety system. Like, don't fall, man. Don't fall. We don't want you guys falling. Okay. So we'll talk about that later. But so Mark, let's jump into the next part of this. So you got into it in 1980. So tell me a little bit about, as you got started, what was going well, what wasn't going well, what were one or two of those moments when you're like, oh no, what have I done? And because I want to talk about solution building. I want to make sure we got plenty of time for that because it's really, really important. But kind of give us a sneak peek into that part of your business.
Okay, so I think early on, trying to figure out how to do proposals is a tricky thing. More contractors do guesstimation rather than doing a proposal. They don't have any way of, they think, well, it's going to take approximately so many hours, and they can go to the lumber. I mean, they can call and find material prices and figure that out pretty close. But it ends up being a more of a guess a lot of times than any kind of a process or system. And I tried different computer programs, and there are these silver bullet, makes it sound like you buy this one program and man, you can just plug in a couple numbers and it's going to do all the work for you. Well, I didn't ever have very good luck with any of those. Not that they didn't do what they said they would. It wasn't that simple fix that it sounded like it was going to be. So I went through the process of some Excel spreadsheets and some Word documents and built a system that would work for me that, can be customized to whatever area you're in, because that's another problem with those programs online is they're kind of national numbers rather than local areas, and there's such a variance in pricing on different things, different places. And So went through that and figured that out, and used that proposal system. And I've had multiple contractors that were subcontractors of mine have asked me about, well, where did you come up with that process to do that? And where did you get that tool? And I've shared it with multiple subs and so on. And I've even had a couple of different subcontractors that we would be bidding on the same project, and they would actually have me do their proposals for them so that they could have a proposal that was comparable, and then they would adjust accordingly. But yeah, it's just, so that was that. And then I was in a partnership for a while, and we'd had a consulting firm come in, hired them and paid them a lot of money, and they had some great stuff. But what then happened is my partner and the rest of the people that were working for us weren't implementing those programs that they had, developed or designed for us or helped us with. And so that's where I then started building on those two, and have implemented, those processes like that. So, that's kind of got me into the toolbox part of it. We've done digital tools and then one of the things that happened early on that affected those tools was, when you go into business for yourself, nobody tells you that you're going to have to pay those income taxes at the end of the year and how big that's going to be. And that first year I got that number from the accountant, and it was in that $15,000 range, and I'm like, I don't have $15,000 to pay those taxes. So given the options, I ended up making payments to the IRS for years, monthly payments, but out of that developed a savings transfer sheet that now every time I get a check from any customer, there's a percentage of that goes in for multiple different things, whether that's income tax, truck repairs replacement, tool repairs and replacement, withholding, all kinds of, emergencies that might come up. And it takes a chunk of that, but it's really nice now when I need to write the check to the income tax, just pull it out of savings. So those are the kind of things that, another example of that kind of a thing that, you got a truck and the transmission goes out. Well, having that savings in there for that is huge to be able to keep the doors open and just keep moving forward. And those are the kind of things that, after having gone through those experiences, you figure out a way to do it, but it ultimately comes down to whether or not you're going to do it. And so that's kind of how I've ended up with some of that stuff. So
yeah. So I'm just thinking back to some of these podcasts that we've done, and listeners, I hope you're doing the same thing. Like, I hope you're going, wait a minute, man, I know Scott and Josh talked about this, right? Bling Baker Bust, that was that 3-part series that we did. When you go in and look at the analytics of those podcasts, guys, those are the ones that you guys have listened to the most. Those have the highest listener percentages, right? So that struck a chord with you somewhere. And I think the reason that it struck the chord is you probably have found yourself more often than not. And if you haven't already, man, I hope you don't. I hope you take what you're listening to today and maybe go back and listen to some of those other podcasts. What Mark is saying is real. And unless you've gone to business school, and even because I went to business school, right? We learned a lot of stuff in business school. You don't really learn how to run a business. They really don't talk to you about withholdings and quarterlies, and they don't talk to you about that stuff. So unless you have an accounting degree, where maybe they'll talk about that stuff, most of us don't. And it's trial and error, or it's having the opportunities to learn from someone who's been there, done that, someone more seasoned. And that's what I love about having Mark here. I mean, guys, he's been doing this since 1980. I'm not doing anything to point to your age, Mark, man, but you've been doing this for a while. We have a lot that we can learn from the older generation, the mature, the experienced generation. And Mark's giving that to you, right? Like, guys, this is free. Think about what you're getting here. Mark didn't have to do this, right? And he's going to talk a little bit about the solution building program. And he's going to talk a little bit about the toolbox. We did not bring him here to sell you something. Okay? I need you to know that. I didn't bring him here to sell you something. He's not on here because we're paying him. Mark cares about what he built for his own company, and he cares about other builders who want to do it right, take pride in their work, and and want to succeed. That's what Burrows wants for you too. So I just stress that a little bit because we've talked about this, and what Mark said is, oh my gosh, I got that number from my accountant, and I was like, now what? So the what'd you call it, Mark? The savings transfer sheet?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's great, guys. Like, what a great tool. I take a check in from a customer, a percentage goes here, and a percentage goes here, and a percentage goes here. Because I think what happens is, I do know this. I don't think I know. A lot of you guys are robbing Peter to pay Paul. Okay. That's the other thing you get with this podcast, right? Is we're blunt. We don't sugarcoat anything. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're taking this deposit from this customer and floating, paying these expenses over here. And quite honestly, if you're honest with yourself, you're probably afraid to show an accountant your books, if they even exist. And that's not a chastisement, right? This is sobering. And so, Josh, I don't want to leave you out here, man, because you've been a business owner too. Like, tell me what you're thinking. This is your first time to hear from Mark. What are you thinking about what Mark is saying? Back to our listeners, and then we're going to go back to Mark.
No, like you said, is always learning. And our clients are business owners. They're smart. They're intelligent. They've started businesses. I would just encourage you to continue to learn. And that's why we do the podcast. That's why we have Mark here with us today. And, I know that people think that I like to hear myself talk, so I'm not going to keep going on and on here. But we brought Mark here because we bring value to our customers, right? And that's what we're going to continue to do over and over and over again. That's why you do business with us. And I'm just personally looking forward to hearing what Mark's next subject line is here.
Yeah. So let's go to the next part, because obviously, guys, we have a little bit of a structure when we come to you. We have some type of plan. Whether we follow it or not, that's yet to be seen. But so, Mark, as we start to build up toward the solutions building and the toolbox, what would you think, from your perspective, the big three musts are? What are like the big three musts of a construction business success?
Well, okay, so I'm going to tie this right in with what Josh was saying and what we've been talking about and so on, because I think the first thing you need to know is why. Why are you in business? What is your purpose? What are you doing this for? I mean, is it just for a paycheck? Is it to serve other customers, the customers that you're working for? Is it, to build a better community? I mean, what is it? You've got to get down to that foundation and figure out why you're doing it and be clear on that. And that kind of then is what that leads into that, that the solution building piece of this is what I kind of figured out there after the accident. And we've got a 4-step process that kind of came to me then, that we call our build process. And that starts out with being aware. So the B in build is being aware. And I think most contractors and people in construction are aware that there's something not going like it should. I mean, they're aware that there are issues, but they don't know what to do about it or where to go from there. So the U then is understanding. Once you begin to look into that and understand it and figure out what it is the problems are, but and you may even know how they need to be fixed, but it gets down to the real important piece of this, which is one of those other musts that you were talking about, and that's intentional action. So the I in that build acronym is intentional action, and that is where it all falls apart. That's where most guys know things are a mess. They don't like it, but the time and energy that it's going to take, they just don't do it. It's that, but that's really the important part. Then the L is learning, and that is the thing that from now on we'll continue to learn and improve and get better and do new things which then ultimately leads to the D, which is the delivery of the dream. I mean, that we've all got this vision in our minds of, you know, what that dream business is going to look like, or our life is going to look like when we own our own construction company. And then when it doesn't look like that, we get really frustrated, and that's where, you know, most of them find themselves. So I think that, you know, that is one of those important things, is that knowing your why and then being able to take intentional action, you know, is doing those, you know, things in order to accomplish what we want. So
I love that. The two things that, well, there's three things that you said there. Why am I in this business? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Man, that is so good, Mark. And for those of you who also listen, you know, I have a life outside of Burrows, um, and was actively and still am actively involved in men's ministry. And that is one of the questions that we often talk about is what's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? But even the question that follows that one up is, what do you want to do? Do you find yourself at the mercy of your business? Or, like Mark said, has there not been this intentionality to go, whoa, okay, things aren't where I want them to be. I want a successful, healthy construction company. I love being able to employ people. Like, what do you love about what you're doing? And if that love for what you're doing is being threatened because you're not taking time to be intentional to protect that last part, I love that, your dream, then man, hit the pause button. And I know how it can be. Oh, I gotta work. I can't take off work. I gotta work. I gotta work 50 hours a week. I'm telling you what, man. You might discover that if you put pause and take a day to go be alone and think about your business and think about your why, where are you not being intentional and where do you need to be intentional? Man, guys, this is gold. I hope you realize that this is gold. I love that, Mark. Um, any other thoughts on the big three musts?
well, and I would close that thought line up with, and it all ties. It's that what I call the superpower of choice. We can choose what we're going to do, and I found that after the accident. I mean, it was that whole thing of I can continue where I'm at, or I can choose to climb out of this rut and do some things different. And that doesn't. It's not like it's back to the silver bullet. It's not like it's some magical thing that's just going to happen, you know, at the wave of a wand. But it's just that choice. And I think that is, you know, being aware of that and using that superpower makes a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. I love it. Okay, so here's what's happening, guys. So we are about 23 minutes into this. We usually go 25 or so. We talked about this a little bit before. Mark's got a whole lot more to share. We're actually going to talk about the big thing, the three things to avoid, right? So he's talked to us about some great things. I think he's got a lot of things he contribute about, man, don't do this or avoid this, like learning from some of those. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of value versus price. That's another thing that I think we see a lot of. I see a lot of is thinking about price more than value, and then letting Mark go through the toolbox of solution building. So why don't we do this? I think we should go ahead and pause here. I think this is a really good spot to pause, and we're gonna have a part two, right? So I want you to digest, and I think that's the other part here. We've just talked about a lot in a short amount of time. I want you to digest that. I want you to think about that because we're going to jump right back on to the next to finish this conversation, but it's going to be a week for you, right? So you're going to listen to this, and you've got a week to think about what was said. And I think that's going to help you when you come back to part two, because I think you're going to come to part two ready to hear what's next. Does that sound fair, guys?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. All right. All right. So this was part one of solution building. What's in your toolbox? And we're going to go part two. So thank you for listening. I hope you go back and take some notes and enter some thoughts. Think about what Mark has said here and come back with a notepad for part two. take some notes, and we got a little special surprise. So that's the cliffhanger. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you on part 2 of Post Frame 360.